It's Brian Preston, the money guy.
I wanted to dispel the biggest lie that Americans have about millionaires.
Oh, that just sounds juicy when you lay it out there.
And look, I want to be confessional on this, is that I grew up in this household. I have great parents. I grew up, I consider it a great childhood. Don't come from a lot of money, but my father always did have a little bit of an edge on people who had success, and the fact that this is the biggest lie. He said, you know, those people got it because they lucky silver spoon. They were born
into
with
the right
it. They
family,
were born
right?
into it. So I grew up with this being told to me. Truthfully, I didn't have my realization that wealth was not all inherited until I started my first public accounting job right out of college. I was doing tax preparation, and I started doing a lot of tax returns. I was like, these people pay a lot of taxes. Wait a minute, what's going on here? What do they do for a living? And I started seeing that maybe there were some fibs that were being perpetrated on the general public. But don't take our word for it. This is a known fact. Everyday Millionaires had some great data points on this huge line that's being put upon the American public. So let's kind of talk about do millionaires inherit their wealth?
Yeah, I think because I had the same thought. I think when I was growing up, Brian, I thought that, to be wealthy, you had to have inherited that. But I think one of the reasons I thought that is when I was growing up, I wasn't around a lot of wealthy people. And you just said something I thought that was so interesting is once you started working in public accounting, seeing the way that wealthy people behave and the decisions they make, it did change that view. So I think a lot of it is misinformation from folks who just haven't been around wealthy people or had that kind of access.
Yeah, because I was told as a child, they inherited their money and they don't pay any taxes. Those are the two things that were told to me constantly. And then once I got out there, I realized it was completely different. So what did Chris Hogan find in his research is that, listen to this stat, you the millennials out there, because Bo, you fall into the millennial generation.
Yep.
This blew my mind. Share with them what we found out about millennials.
Yeah, so when it comes to millennials, 74% believe that millionaires inherited their wealth. They thought 74% of millennials believe that in order to be wealthy, you had to have inherited that. You had to receive some sort of assistance to become wealthy.
So the lie that I had as a child has been passed down to your
next
generation as well. So how about the generation? Obviously, my parents were the ones telling me this. If we go to the baby boomers generation, my parents, how many of them think that wealth is inherited?
Yeah, so if you look at the baby boomer generation, 52%, so still over half of that generation think that millionaires inherited their wealth.
So let's cut through the noise and actually look at the numbers. We did our Money Guy annual wealth survey, and I'm happy to report 77% of our clients have absolutely received nothing. Nothing. Now, if you add, look, the ones that did receive something, because I think this data point is a little skewed, because there have been some inheritance, but if you take away inheritances less than $100,000, that 77% that received nothing jumps up to 89%.
That's exactly right.
And that's an incredible data point.
So what that says is a lot of the majority of clients that we work with, these successful individuals that we help them steer their financial lives, they didn't do it because someone just handed them their wealth.
There were no large gifts, no inheritances. They are first generation. So all the people out there in the news media and all the people in your support life that are telling you the system is cut and cast against you, they are full of malarkey. Now, I wanted to give it, because I have multiple resources here. So you're like, well, Brian, you just reach out to your clients. How does that tie to other people's research? The Millionaire Next Door, the one that started it all for me, 1996, the data point is 80% of people are first generation wealth. Don't take it from the Millionaire Next Door. What about what Sarah's research, Dr. Stanley's daughter, her number was 86% from the year 2016.
Yep.
And then Chris Hogan, I did this very inefficiently, in 2017, he had 79% inherited nothing, but he said had the same break point in the data that people under 100,000, it was actually 84%.
Yep.
So all of it ties right into the point that this is a tremendous lie that's being put upon the general public.
That's right.
So let's talk about, well, if that is where wealth is coming from, the next question I always like to ask wealthy people is, what do you consider wealth? Are you wealthy, or what do you consider wealthy? Because remember, this comes back. I had a friend in Atlanta, really close friends with about as close as being a billionaire you can be. It was a young guy who had started, well, he's my age now,
Sure.
but he made
Still
his fortune
young-ish.
doing some coding and writing technology for internet security and other things like that. Has a lot of buildings named after him, pretty popular guy. And my friend from Georgia was really close with him, and I said, look, whenever y'all have a night where you're having adult beverages, ask him what he thinks rich is. Because somebody who's worth close to $1 billion, I want to know their perspective.
What do they think?
So the one night he did it, and the answer was $10 million. And I said, well, did he give you a reason why 10 million was the number and what he considers wealthy? He said, well, about anybody can probably over the long term make at least 5%. And if you can make 5% on $10 million, you're making $500,000 a year. If you can make an income of $500,000 a year perpetually, you're probably pretty wealthy.
You're doing all right.
I thought it was great that he had logic. Of course he had logic. I mean, this guy is very brilliant. So, but I wanted to do the same thing. I wanted to ask our clients, what do you consider wealthy? And I only wanted to pertain to clients that were over $3 million in net worth.
Yep.
And here's what they answered. They said 53% said to be considered wealthy, it's $3 to $5 million of assets.
So for the folks who had over $3 million, you said, what is wealthy? And they answered, 53% said, $3 to $5 million.
And I should say net worth, not assets,
Sure,
but net
sure.
worth, so net of the liabilities, it's $3 to $5 million net worth. And then 31% of our survey said it was greater than $6 million.
Okay, so 31% of those folks who have more than $3 million, who have already reached some level of success, said in order to actually be wealthy, it's some number bigger than $6 million.
So then I asked them one more question. I thought this is a completely separate question. I said, okay, now remember, this is only people that we surveyed that were worth over $3 million. So majority of them fell within this category that we're talking about. Do you consider yourself wealthy?
So I want to recap the stats real quick. We just said that 53% of these folks said that if you have at least $3 to $5 million, you're wealthy. And then we said the question, well, do you consider yourself wealthy? Right? That's the layout.
Here's the shocker, and I get it. 53% said no. They are not actually wealthy. 47% said they were. So I was like, well, how in the world do people, if we're all aspiring to be worth $3 million and greater, how do people who are actually worth that much, the majority of them think that they're not wealthy? What can explain that difference? And a lot of them, their answer was they still worry about how much money they spend or about replacing income they make. So it makes complete sense. But I do think it's very important that when, and I think this is some of the feedback we get on some of the other millionaire shows is you guys, we talk about what does it take to make $1 million? And a lot of you say 3 million is the new number. And maybe that is the truth. But I will tell you that first million is still the hardest to make. So we're trying to get you there as fast as possible.